In 1926, the last gray wolf in Yellowstone National Park was removed, leaving behind a landscape that appeared on the surface to be an untouched wilderness paradise. For 70 years, the howling was absent from the valleys, replaced by a heavy artificial silence that most visitors didn't even realize was there. But beneath that picturesque surface, a slow-motion ecological collapse was occurring. The park was changing in ways that were subtle at first, then increasingly disturbing. Without their natural predator, the elk populations exploded, and as they grazed their way through the park, they didn't just eat the grass. They essentially began to dismantle the architecture of the entire ecosystem. By the early 90s, Yellowstone was a shadow of its former self, a place where the trees had stopped growing, the songbirds had fled, and the rivers were literally falling apart. When scientists finally brought the wolves back in 1995, they expected a change. But what they discovered was something hauntingly beautiful. They found that a single predator could perform a type of biological magic, physically reshaping the very geography of the Earth itself. To truly understand what happened, we have to look back at the decades when the wolves were absent. Think of an ecosystem like a complex machine with thousands of moving parts. When you remove a primary cog like the wolf, the other parts don't just stop. They start spinning out of control. Without wolves to keep them moving, the elk in Yellowstone became lazy and emboldened. In a healthy system, elk are constantly on the move, wary of the shadows in the trees. But in the wolf-free years, they gathered in massive herds in the river valleys. They stayed in one place for weeks, grazing every green shoot that dared to break through the soil. This wasn't just grazing. It was a total erasure of the next generation of trees. Aspen, willow, and cottonwood trees started to vanish. If you walked through Yellowstone in the 80s, you would see massive old trees, but almost no young ones. It was a forest that had forgotten how to regenerate. This is where the story gets truly haunting, because the young trees were being eaten before they could grow. The birds that relied on those trees for nesting began to disappear. The landscape became quieter, more monotonous. But the most shocking impact was on the water. Without willow and aspen trees to provide shade and stabilize the banks, the rivers of Yellowstone began to erode. The banks crumbled, the water became shallower and warmer, and the very path of the rivers started to change. They began to meander in wide, destructive loops, carrying away tons of precious topsoil. It was an ecological ghost town scenario where the physical earth was losing its grip. Scientists were watching a world where the lack of one species was literally causing the ground to wash away. In January 1995, after years of intense political and scientific debate, the first gray wolves were captured in Canada and released into the Lamar Valley of Yellowstone. It was a small group, just 14 individuals, but their impact was instantaneous. Biologists initially thought the wolves would just reduce the number of elk, a simple case of subtraction. But what actually happened was far more complex and fascinating. It's what scientists call a trophic cascade. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. The wolves didn't just eat the elk, they changed the way the elk lived. This is the ecology of fear. As soon as the wolves arrived, the elk realized that standing out in the open valleys was no longer a safe bet. They moved into the higher ground and the thicker timber. They became scouts again, constantly moving, constantly alert. The moment the elk moved out of the valleys, the earth began to heal with a speed that left researchers stunned. In areas where the elk used to linger, the willows and aspens shot up. In some places, trees quintupled in height in just a few years. It was as if the park was taking its first deep breath in 7 decades. As the trees returned, so did the birds. Suddenly, the valleys were filled with the songs of migratory birds and the chatter of kingfishers. The canopy was back, providing the complex vertical habitat that a healthy forest requires. But the wolves brought back more than just birds. They brought back the engineers of the animal kingdom, the beavers. Beavers are water specialists, but they need wood to build their dams. During the wolf-free years, the beaver population in Yellowstone had dwindled to almost nothing because the elk had eaten all the willow shoots. But as the wolves pushed the elk away and the willows recovered, the beavers moved back in. And this is where the discovery becomes hauntingly profound. The beavers built dams, and those dams created ponds and wetlands. These wetlands provided habitat for otters, muskrats, ducks, fish, and reptiles. The beaver dams also acted as natural filters, cleaning the water and recharging the groundwater levels. The wolves, by simply existing, had reignited a chain reaction that was rebuilding the entire water system of the park. But the most incredible discovery, the one that really changed our understanding of nature, was the physical change to the rivers. Because the trees and beavers were back, the riverbanks stabilized. The roots of the new aspens and willows acted like natural rebar, holding the soil in place. The rivers stopped eroding and started to narrow. They formed deep, cool pools. The channels became more fixed, less prone to the wild, destructive meandering of the previous decades. The wolves had, in a very real sense, changed the physical shape of the Yellowstone rivers. They had rearranged the literal geography of the American West. This was a scientific revelation that proved nature is far more interconnected than we ever dreamed. A predator wasn't just a consumer. It was a creator. The wolves also reshaped the scavenger community. In the years without wolves, the coyotes had taken over as the primary smaller predator, but they weren't very good at leaving leftovers. Wolves, on the other hand, leave carcasses that provide a massive food source for other animals. Researchers found that the return of the wolves was a boon for grizzly bears, black bears, bald eagles, and even magpies. As the bears came down to feed on wolf leftovers, they also benefited from the increased berry production on the now healthy shrubs. It was a closed-loop system of success. The wolves were effectively paying the rest of the park for their presence through a steady supply of nutrients that fed the entire food web. One of the most haunting realizations for the scientists was how much they had underestimated the wolf. We used to think of predators as a separate, often unnecessary part of the landscape, something that could be managed or removed without much consequence. Yellowstone proved that the predator is the glue. Without the predator, a herbivore becomes a destructive force. Without the predator, the vegetation fails. Without the vegetation, the soil fails. Without the soil, the water fails. The wolves weren't just a part of Yellowstone. They were the architects of its resilience. This discovery has completely changed how we approach conservation today, shifting the focus from saving a species to restoring a process. The genetic impact was also remarkable. By bringing back the wolves, the elk population became stronger and healthier. Predators don't just take any animal. They take the weak, the old, and the sick. This culling process ensures that only the strongest individuals survive to pass on their genes. This evolutionary pressure was missing for 70 years, and its return meant that the Yellowstone elk herds were becoming more robust and better adapted to their environment. It was a win for everyone, even the prey species in the long run. The return of the wolves also sparked a massive increase in tourism, bringing millions of dollars into the local economy every year. People from all over the world travel to the Lamar Valley just to catch a glimpse of a wolf through a spotting scope. This has created a new perspective on wildlife. We began to see that a living wolf is worth infinitely more to a community than a removed one. The wolf effect wasn't just biological, it was social and economic. It proved that we can coexist with large predators, and that their presence makes our world richer in every sense of the word. As the years progressed, scientists began to look at the indirect effects of the wolves. They found that even the insects were benefiting. With the return of the willows and cottonwoods, the diversity of insects exploded. These insects in turn fed more birds and small mammals. The layers of life were stacking back up, one on top of the other, all because a few packs of wolves were patrolling the high country. It was a masterclass in ecological restoration that no human could have managed on their own. We didn't have to replant the trees or fix the riverbanks ourselves. We just had to bring back the missing piece of the puzzle and step out of the way. There is a haunting beauty in the idea that nature knows how to fix itself if we just give it the chance. The 70-year absence of the wolves was a giant, unintended experiment that showed us what happens when we try to simplify nature. We learned that a simplified nature is a fragile nature. A complex, predator-rich nature is an unstoppable force of life. The howling that returned to Yellowstone in 1995 wasn't just a sound. It was the soundtrack of a planet healing itself. It was the sound of the rivers finding their paths again and the trees growing tall once more. Looking back, the discovery wasn't just about the wolves. It was about us. We discovered that our role in nature is not to be the masters of every species, but to be the guardians of the systems that allow all species to thrive. The haunting reality that the Earth can fall apart without its predators is matched by the inspiring reality that it can be rebuilt by those same predators. Yellowstone today is a vibrant, chaotic, and incredibly healthy ecosystem that serves as a blueprint for the rest of the world. It tells us that it's never too late to fix what is broken. The study of the Yellowstone Cascade is now taught in every major biology program on Earth. It is the gold standard for understanding ecological relationships. But the work isn't done. Scientists are still monitoring the park every day, looking at how the return of the wolves is helping the park face new challenges like climate change and shifting migration patterns. What they are finding is that the wolf engine makes the park more resilient to these changes. A healthy forest can handle a drought better than a dying one. A stable riverbank can handle a flood better than a crumbling one. The wolves didn't just fix the past. They are protecting the future. One of the most poignant moments in this history was the realization that we had forgotten what a normal Yellowstone looked like. For 70 years, we thought the dying aspens and the eroding rivers were just how nature was. We had lost our baseline. Bringing the wolves back was like cleaning a dirty window. Suddenly, we could see the world as it was truly meant to be. We realized that our idea of normal was actually a state of sickness. This is a powerful lesson for all of conservation. We must always ask ourselves if what we are seeing today is the best version of nature or just the version we've become used to. As the wolf packs expanded throughout the park and into the surrounding national forests, they faced new challenges. There were conflicts with ranchers and local communities, but even these conflicts have led to incredible scientific discoveries. We've learned how to use non-lethal deterrence, how to track packs with satellite precision, and how to manage the boundary between the wild and the human world. The Yellowstone discovery has moved beyond the park borders and is now influencing how we manage wolves in Europe, tigers in Asia, and lions in Africa. The haunting lesson of the missing wolf has become a global message of restoration. Let's talk about the coyotes again for a moment. Before the wolves came back, coyotes had become the top dogs and their population had surged. They were putting immense pressure on small mammals like ground squirrels and pronghorn fawns. When the wolves returned, they didn't tolerate these competitors. They reduced the coyote population significantly. This in turn led to a surge in the population of red foxes and a recovery of the pronghorn antelope. It's yet another example of how the wolf effect ripples out in directions no one expected. By suppressing one animal, they saved another. It's a delicate, beautiful balance that only a natural predator can maintain. The grizzlies of Yellowstone also owe a debt to the wolves. In the late summer and fall, bears need to pack on calories for hibernation. While they are famous for eating berries and trout, wolf-provided carcasses have become a vital part of their diet. Because the wolves are such efficient hunters, they provide a reliable source of protein that allows the bears to enter hibernation in better condition. This leads to higher survival rates and a healthier bear population. The wolf is the provider, the bear is the scavenger, and the park is the beneficiary. It's a partnership that was broken for 70 years and is now back in full swing. The physical rejuvenation of the aspen groves is perhaps the most visible sign of the wolves' return. If you go to Yellowstone today, you will see stands of trees of all different ages. You see the giants, but you also see the teenagers and the toddlers. This age structure is the sign of a healthy forest. It means that when the old trees finally fall, there will be something there to take their place. For 70 years, the forest was middle-aged and dying. Today, it is young and vibrant. This regrowth has also improved soil quality, as falling leaves and decaying wood from the new trees provide nutrients for a new generation of plants. The discovery that wolves could change the direction of a river remains the most poetic part of this story. It challenges our view of the world as something made of things, and instead shows it as something made of flows. The wolf flows into the elk flows out of the valley, the willow flows into the riverbank, and the riverbank flows into the water's path. It is all one continuous movement. When we removed the wolf, we broke the flow. When we brought them back, the movement resumed. It's a reminder that beauty in nature isn't just a static picture, it's a functional rhythm. The impact on songbirds was particularly striking. Researchers found that as the willows grew taller and denser, the number of bird species in the park significantly increased. We are talking about yellow warblers, willow flycatchers, and song sparrows. These birds were essentially evicted when the elk overgrazed the valleys. Their return brought the sound back to Yellowstone. A scientist who had worked in the park for 40 years once said that the most haunting thing about the wolves was how they made the park noisy again. It was the noise of life. Looking at the park from above, satellite imagery has actually tracked these changes. You can see the greening of the river corridors over the last 25 years. You can see the new beaver ponds appearing as little blue jewels in the landscape. You can see the stabilization of the river channels. It's a document of recovery written in the land itself. The wolves have left their mark on the very topographic maps of the United States. Why did it take us so long to realize what was happening? Part of the reason is that ecological changes are often slow. We didn't notice the trees stopped growing because it happened over decades. We didn't notice the rivers crumbling because it was a gradual process. It took the dramatic rebounding effect of the wolves to show us the magnitude of what we had lost. This is a haunting warning for our own time. What other slow-motion collapses are we currently ignoring because they are happening just slowly enough that we don't feel the panic? Yellowstone teaches us to pay attention to the small things before they become big catastrophes. The return of the wolves also changed the way we think about wildness. Many people initially feared that bringing wolves back would make the park dangerous. But what we found was that it made the park more complete. Real wildness isn't about safety or danger. It's about a system operating under its own rules without our intervention. The wolves brought back that autonomy. They restored the dignity of the wilderness, turning a managed park back into a living, breathing, wild place. The story of Yellowstone's wolves is also a story of human humility. We thought we knew better. We thought we could manage a park without its top predator. We were wrong. The wolves proved to be much better at managing Yellowstone than we ever were. They didn't need budgets, meetings, or management plans. They just needed to hunt and survive. This discovery should give us pause the next time we think we can optimize a natural system by removing a part of it we don't like. The restoration of the park is now so successful that it has become a source for other reintroduction programs. Wolves from Yellowstone have been used to repopulate parts of Idaho and Montana, carrying the lessons of the Lamar Valley across the western United States. The Yellowstone discovery is a fire that is spreading, lighting the way for a new era of ecology. We are learning that the key to a healthy planet isn't just about protecting what we have left, but about having the courage to put back what we took away. As we look toward the future, the wolves of Yellowstone remain a symbol of our evolving relationship with the natural world. They are a reminder that even after 70 years of silence, a landscape can hear the call of its ancestors and respond. The willows are still growing, the beavers are still building, and the rivers are still finding their way. The haunting discovery isn't that nature is fragile, but that it is incredibly, almost stubbornly resilient if we just give it a chance. The wolves didn't just save Yellowstone. They saved our understanding of it. They showed us that a single predator could be a force of creation. They showed us that the smallest bird and the largest tree are connected to the tracks of a wolf in the snow. And they showed us that the most profound scientific discoveries are sometimes the ones that make us stop, listen to the wind, and hear the howling for the first time in a generation. The science of the Yellowstone wolves is a gift that keeps on giving. Every year, new papers are published that find even more subtle and profound ways the wolves have influenced the park. From the carbon sequestration in the new forests to the health of the soil microbes, the wolf effect seems to have no end. It is a mystery that only deepens the more we look at it. And that is perhaps the most haunting discovery of all, that we will never fully understand the complexity of the world we inhabit. Each species holds a key to a door we don't even know exists. The wolves of the Lamar Valley and the Blacktail Plateau aren't just animals anymore. They are the guardians of a miracle. They have proven that the earth can be healed, that geography can be reshaped, and that a 70-year silence can be broken by a single, powerful sound. As the sun sets over the Grand Tetons and the wolves begin their nightly patrol, we can be thankful for the lesson they've taught us. We've learned that nature is a masterpiece not because of how it looks, but because of how it works. And as long as the wolves are there to do their work, Yellowstone will remain the vibrant, wild, and unstoppable heart of the American West. The haunting discovery in Yellowstone is ultimately a message of hope. It tells us that our past mistakes do not have to be our future. We can return what was stolen. We can fix what we broke. And when we do, nature will reward us with a richness we can't even imagine. The rivers will stabilize, the trees will return, and the songbirds will sing once more. This is the enduring legacy of the Yellowstone wolves. They didn't just change the park, they changed us. We are now a people who know the value of a predator, the power of a trophic cascade, and the haunting beauty of a world that is whole once again. In the end, it's not about the 14 wolves that were released in 1995. It's about the millions of changes they set in motion. It's about the soil, the water, the wood, and the wind. It's about a park that was dying and is now more alive than it has been in a century. It's about the realization that we are part of a grand, beautiful, and incredibly complex system that we are only just beginning to understand. The Yellowstone wolves have shown us the way. Now, it's up to us to listen to the howling and follow their lead. The discovery is clear. A complete nature is an unstoppable nature, and that is a discovery that will haunt and inspire us for generations to come.